Today's video, I'm going to be talking to you something that I learned this year that I feel like has helped elevate my filmmaking. And that thing is preparation. You know, as a filmmaker last year, if you look at the shorts that I was making, they had a lot of issues in them. You know, I was ambitious. I wanted to make stuff, put out stuff, because that's what you do. You just make stuff. But all the things that I worked on always had the same issue. There were some technical things that were just not working. The frames were not working. I was entering into spaces without knowing where I was and how we were working. But this year, one thing that I've learned is preparation is key to everything you do. And how you use your prep time is also very critical. So what goes into prep? As a cinematographer, one of the main things you are tasked with is creating the look of the film. You come up with the shot sizes, the camera that's going to be used, the lenses that you're going to use, the type of lighting. A lot of these things are what your job entails, and you're trying to help the director achieve their vision. If you're the director, you are responsible for the story, you're responsible for the vision, you're responsible for everything that everybody is working on. And your prep is basically one, to prep yourself as a director, but to prep everybody else, making sure everybody else knows what they'll be doing on the day. And one of the challenges with short films, especially when they're not paid, is you don't really people don't give you time for their prep. So a lot of things get lost in communication and translation, and you soon find out that when you're filming a shot, especially as the director, you are almost wearing every hat. You're almost doing prep for other people's departments, or you're following up, which is not fun, but it's something that you have to do in order to have a great project at the end of the day. Now, one of the things that I like to do is come up with a short list. I come up with my short list. I know what type of shots that we need. This is after breaking down the script and having an understanding of what type of version of the story we are going to create. And then on the day, we're not wasting time trying to think of what type of shots. One thing I used to do when I was starting out was, I am one of those people who have an eye for photography. So I always thought that I don't need to prepare. I don't need to have a shot list. I don't need to have an idea of what I need. On the day, we will make some magic. And one of the challenges that you have is on the day when you have to communicate with different people in different departments, it becomes tricky, because when you're like, okay, I want a shot from The Sopranos, but with the lighting from The Batman. It's like, what does that even mean? You know, and then now you have to find the language to be able to communicate. And sometimes you're working with a gaffer that you just met on set that day, and you're like, how do we do this? And I feel like me, every time I get in those moments, I always wish I had prepared more. I was more, because if I had prepped, I'll be able to have my requirements met. You know, I'll be able to communicate what it is that I'm thinking. Another thing that a resource that I recommend that everybody gets is Shot Deck. You know, being on Shot Deck, it's frustrating sometimes because there's certain shots that you're looking for which they don't give you. But the benefit of it is, if you have a movie that you watch that you want to reference, you can easily take off a picture or show somebody like, this is the reference of what we're going for. And then you're able to create that mood and stuff. Because I think sometimes, especially for people who, like me, English is your second language, it's very difficult to express sometimes like what it is you're thinking. But sometimes when people see a picture, they say a picture is 1,000 words. It helps people visualize what it is that you're seeing when you're like, all right, I want a sort of moody space. I want it this way. And then your gaffer is able to go to fix that for you, and your production designer is able to do certain things for you, and then your actors know. You know, being a director, once again, like especially when you're working on these small short films, is you are the production designer, you are the cinematographer, you are almost every hat. And if you don't prepare before the day of the shoot, you will be very stressed out, because what a lot of people do is on the day of shooting, that's when they have a lot of questions for you. And that is the last place you want to be getting questions, is on the day. You don't want your production designer asking you what the color palette is on the day, because on the day, one, you're trying to create an environment for your actors to work. You're trying to move certain things. If you're wearing the producer hat, you're responsible for multiple things. So that time you really need to protect your mind, especially as the director. So preparation time for me is critical, and it has helped me in terms of just how I film, how I think about things. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about what's the next shot. I already know how I cover scenes, in terms of if it's a dialogue scene, how we're doing the coverage. It's beautiful to experiment, but sometimes there's no time. And when you show up knowing, okay, we're gonna shoot it this way, that way, then the camera's gonna be here, and then this is the angle, you are able to just chop off those shots and just move on. And the other beautiful thing is that I've learned is with color grading, right? Like, so a lot of times, one question I always had is, when is the look of a film determined? And I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. I've been listening to a lot of filmmakers just speak about their processes. In film, they have this thing where in big Hollywood productions is after the film is edited, it goes into the digital intermediary, which is basically the color grading, to my understanding, is where this happens, where the DOP comes in and they tweak it and touch it. But what happens in grading is that they're not really doing too much, because the look of the film was already determined pre-production. So they already came up with the lookup table, the LUT for the film, which they shot on. So whilst they're shooting, everyone sees what the final look of the film will be. Sometimes that is the final look. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is what we are going for because of VFX and then all these other effects. And the only way they're able to do that is in prep. Now, at a small level, it might be difficult to get time to test, to run these tests and to come up with these looks. But one thing that I've learned is with LUTs, what we all do is we buy a LUT from Peter McKinnon, buy a LUT from Ethiopia, buy a LUT from whoever you follow on YouTube as your cinematographer, and then we try to put the LUT in post. So at the end, then you're like, I want to do this. But some of the challenges that you have is you don't have enough information. So when you're grading, because of the way you lead the scene, the LUT might not help your scene, right? It might not help you. So what you want to do, especially with some of these cameras like the Sony FX3, you can load up LUTs onto it, and then when you're filming, you have the LUT on the camera, and then you're feeding enough light that's needed for each scene. And this is quite important, especially if you're shooting night interior shots where a lot of light is needed for the shadows, just to make sure you avoid that noise that we all hate. While Sony is great in low light, it still needs light for the information to be captured, right? And when you're outside for your highlights, you want to know what your LUT needs. And if you have your final look, if you can see what you're lighting for, then you will not do much in post. In post, you're just correcting certain colors. It's called color correction. And then you're grading towards the look. But some people, maybe you want to determine your look afterwards. Maybe you don't know. Good for you. But I think just for that prep time, it's important to know what you're looking for. That way, when you're lighting, you're lighting for aesthetics, but also for the technical functionalities. Because one of the things that happens, and this is a thing that I learned about noise. So every image is noise to an extent, right? But what tends to happen is when you're lighting a scene, like a moody scene, right? What tends to happen is on the day, you sort of go for the tone, especially if your director doesn't really care about the camera that much. For them, what they're going with is what their eyes see, which is different from what the camera sees, right? And what we know is you have to overexpose and then bring it down in post so that you avoid noise in your shadows. But what tends to happen is when you're on set, people are like, why is it so bright? And if you have that LUT, what then people see on their monitors is the final look, and you get the correct information that you need. And the alternative to that is, if you're gonna go with those moody things, you can shoot it at that whereby the camera is getting enough data that it needs, but then in post you cannot start pushing shadows up because that creates noise. You didn't put in enough information for your camera to not see. So that is something that if you determine in your pre-production, whilst during production, you don't really have to worry about. And what does this matter at a small level? At a small level, you know, time is everything, because you don't want to waste your time. You don't want to get into post and be like, man, I want to be grading this. You want to be working on your next video. So in everything that you do, preparation, I feel, is critical. And it's just about creating steps for yourself. Like what goes into your pre-production? What are the things? Some people like to storyboard. I cannot draw, and most of the storyboard applications are expensive, so I don't really use it. What I do is I shortlist, I come up, I go on short deck, I have shots that I want that are similar to the thing that I'm thinking. And then I reference a lot of movies and things like that. That way I know on the day what it is that I'm filming. I like using grids on my thing, so everything is in the, I forget, rule of thirds. I always follow the rule of thirds. I'm not really a fan of any other compositional style. Like recently I've fallen in love with center framing, but like everything comes with time and taste, right? So that is one thing. So I now know my own visual language, and then I have the prep on time. And then when you're working with the director, like I've worked with people who like to wing it. The problem with winging it is you don't sometimes have the resources to match what you're winging it. Like you're like, oh, let's wing it, and then the sun goes down. Like right now we're in fall out here in Vancouver, the sun goes straight down, and you're like, oh, we need lights. We cannot just wing it. We need to be really prepared and to know what we're going into. And that's just a thing that I do a lot. I like scouting locations when possible, because you soon find like sometimes you go to film and you get there and you don't have access to power outlets, or you get there and there's no way to put lights. Somebody lives in a townhouse downtown, in the middle of downtown, where you need permits to be able to use anything. And you're like, guys, if we knew, we could have prepped a little better. So preparation, in my opinion, is quite critical. It's something to think about. I'd suggest you write down things while shooting that you just notice, and you're like, yo, I wish I had prepared for this. I wish I prepared for this. And what that does, it helps the next production be a little bit better. If you found some value in this video, hit that like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll be seeing you in the next one.